Hey guys, Dr. Shook here. Hope you're doing well today. What I wanted to do is just have spend a few minutes with you guys discussing something that comes up quite a bit. And someone that I know on one of our pages asked about inflammatory bowel disease. They were talking about colitis that had been diagnosed, I believe lymphocytic or ulcerative colitis. There's a lot of different types of inflammatory bowel diseases. I do see it quite often in the people that I work with, because when someone has one autoimmune condition, they're very likely to have a second one. And I mean, that's what puts you at risk for, you have the greatest chance of developing an autoimmune condition if you already have one, like a second one if you already have one. That puts you at the greatest risk for developing a second autoimmune condition is already having an existing one. And that's because of the autoimmune process and how it is already attacking your tissues. And we could go into a whole presentation on this, but I don't want it to be too overcomplicated here, because the main thing I want to share with you is that if you have an autoimmune condition, I primarily work with Hashimoto's. I work a lot with people that have psoriasis. I work a lot with people that have rheumatoid arthritis. And then we see that people that come to us and that we work with that have one autoimmune condition very often have autoimmunity against multiple tissues. So, I've seen inflammatory bowel disease cases, and the main thing to keep in mind here is that what drives one autoimmune condition drives another autoimmune condition. So what does that mean? It basically means that the drivers of the immune process are often the same exact things. So when I'm trying to help someone with Hashimoto's to decrease the driving factors that are promoting thyroid destruction, the immune system destruction of the thyroid, those factors that we're researching, which primarily are going to be partially digested food proteins, so those are called peptides that can trigger an immune response. Pathogens, which is an umbrella term for a lot of different bacteria, viruses, fungal infections, parasites, and then environmental chemicals that are causing immune reactivity. Those things that we tend to research that tend to be drivers of the immune response, those same things, we can apply that same investigative process to inflammatory bowel conditions. And so when you're looking at it, it's like, well, okay, so how would you support someone that has an inflammatory bowel condition? Well, I might use a slightly different nutraceutical approach, supplementation approach, than I would to someone that might have, Hashimoto's, for example. But the fact is that working them up is very similar, because what your goal is to look at the things that are causing, triggering the immune response or causing loss of normal immune function or dysregulation. So, two broad categories. Is there something stimulating the immune response? Is there some reason that the immune system's not functioning normally? And that's really, I try to really simplify things as much as I can, because really I think a lot of the answers are more simple than extremely complex. That's the reality of it. That's what we tend to find, is that people have problems with immune system regulation, and you've got to start with looking at the things that drive the immune response. And do they have dysregulation for some reason? So something triggering the immune system, or is there a reason that it cannot regulate itself normally? So what are regulation problems? Well, regulatory problems could be due to like very low vitamin D status. Vitamin D helps to produce regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells are immune-based cells. They help to balance the immune response. So when people have no vitamin D, they have a very difficult time with immune system regulatory function. So if you can't regulate a system that's attacking your body, do you think it could be a problem? It could be a problem, okay? I'm telling you. So many times, like I talk about this so much, I feel like I repeat myself a lot. But the fact is that, I say it a lot, but not a lot of people hear it. Our voice has grown over time. My voice and our ability to share this information has grown. But the fact is that clinically, in lots and lots of, the majority of practices, primary care offices, gastroenterology offices, they're looking at pathological processes. They're not looking at functional breakdowns, which are a lot of the things that we're talking about here. So their tools are different, their approaches are different. But when we're looking at like how the body should normally function, these are things we've got to talk about. And when you're looking at an inflammatory bowel process against, or an inflammatory process against the bowel or any tissue, what's driving the immune response? why can't the immune system properly, is it not properly regulated? Is there something causing it to not regulate optimally? So let's talk about regulation. Vitamin D is a huge thing you can look at. You can also look at nutrient deficiencies, right? So can normal biochemistry occur, right? Can normal biochemistry occur? If normal biochemistry can't occur because of deficiencies, what we really find is that there's not necessarily just deficiencies, but imbalances and things. So for inflammatory bowel conditions, what I found, one of the things that I found that can be very, very helpful is supporting someone with very high dose omega-3s. Because a lot of people that have inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmunity in general, they tend to have, not the best diet, and they have a lot of omega-6s in their diet. And omega-6s at a very high, high omega-6 balance, or I should say imbalance, high omega-6s to omega-3s is pro-inflammatory. When we start supplementing them with very high-dose fish oil, we improve their vitamin D levels. We, fill in some of the nutrient deficiencies that could be there. We tend to see some improvements. And then we started supporting them with nutrients to help support the gut. This is a really, really, really generalized approach that I might use in a similar case or a case of inflammatory bowel disease. This is really generalized, right? I'm telling you now, what you want to do, and the best thing to do, if you have access to it, is you get testing done to evaluate these things that are driving the process and the imbalances that might be causing dysregulation of the immune system, right? So what's kind of ticking off the immune system? Why is the immune system actively attacking your body? Is it responding to something else, to a food that you might be eating that has a similar protein structure as your intestinal wall? Right? Is that occurring? Are you consuming a food that has a similar protein structure as your bowel, and that your immune system is confusing the food that it's responding to? So, the reason that's important is because if you can identify foods that you're reacting to, remove them from the diet, and that calms down the immune response, then you might actually calm down the attack against the bowel. We see, those types of things happen clinically with all kinds of autoimmune conditions, identifying triggers, right? Now, I say this, and I hesitate to even mention food sensitivities, because so many people reach out to us and they ask us questions about, I want to get food sensitivity testing done, or I'll see someone that I work with, for the first time, or doing all this history, and they have like 1,000 things that they want to do, and it's actually information overload. I'm telling you, like the greatest successes that I think we've had come from not skipping the basics, which are looking at, that's kind of a tangent, but looking at the things that are most important for normal biochemistry to occur. So many times people are skipping that, and they look at like, oh, it's got to be a food sensitivity, or it's got to be some kind of hidden infection like like Lyme disease or a viral issue. And you know what? Those things are they're important, but at the same time, you've got to cover your very foundational basics first. You don't skip ahead and necessarily look at those things, especially if you're trying to prioritize what you're doing, right? You look at inflammatory load, you look at blood sugar, you look at oxygen delivery. Can normal chemistry occur? Right? You look at, can normal chemistry occur? What all is going on, and you address the foundational needs first, and then you can build off of that. When you're looking at inflammatory bowel disease, it's very much like other autoimmune conditions. There are slightly different supplemental approaches. There can be other triggers of the process, and that's really how you start investigating the problems that are occurring. It's really looking for drivers and triggers of the immune response. So 3 categories. So within the framework of what I do, it's usually detect the problem, remove the problems or support the need, right? So if there's a deficiency, and then it's repair the damage. Okay, so it's detect, remove, repair. And within that framework, when you're detecting, you're looking, like at the very beginning, you're like trying to figure out what's promoting the process. With an autoimmune process, with any autoimmune process, inflammatory bowel disease, you're looking at typically foods, partially digested food proteins, pathogens, which is an umbrella term for a lot of different things. You're looking at environmental, chemical, immune system reactivity, which is different than just having the quantities, having it in your system. Everybody has environmental chemicals and metals and all these things in our body because we live in this modern world. I promise you, everyone has this in their body. One of the most important things that when you're looking at autoimmunity is, are you having an immune reaction to it? So there's different theories on like how you want to approach those chemicals. If there's no immune reactivity, you might not want to stir them up. At least that's one theory. There's a lot of different things you have to take into consideration. Clinical presentation, what's happening to the person? Do we actually mess with that, right? So triggers, okay, those are potential triggers that we will often look at, and then dysregulators. So deficiencies are a huge thing that can cause dysregulation. Now, granted, environmental and these industrial and agricultural chemicals are very effective dysregulators of the systems of the body, the endocrine system, and they can be big problems too. So, I mean, you got to look at this thing in clinical context, but the simplest thing is, okay, eat a healthy whole foods diet, step one, like no matter what. I mean, I will tell you now that whenever I work with people, if they can't change their diet, if they're not willing to change their diet, or they have a self-limiting belief about their ability to eat certain foods or do certain things, I mean, I always take that into consideration, but if it's an unreasonable barrier, like they're holding themselves back or they're tied to a belief about a food or something, it's like I can't help them, you know. If they're not willing to give up certain things, like, oh, I can't give up my morning coffee or these things, some of the things that they do, they're like tied to it. Well, that might be what's limiting you right there. That might be one of the things that's creating some of the problems that you're experiencing. So you've got to be willing to make change, which can be the hardest thing for people to do. But anyway, I wanted to share this with you guys, just a little bit of information on inflammatory bowel disease, because it came up, and I wanted to share this with someone in one of our groups. So I thought I would just discuss it here and see how much I could help you guys. Hope everyone's doing okay. Yeah, vitamin D is very low. Your doc has you on 50,000 units. It kills my stomach. So that's interesting. Vitamin D, I've not seen vitamin D cause gut irritation. I will tell you that, like, I usually, when I use vitamin D in practice, we use it sublingually. So it's a liquid, or it's either a sublingual form that will absorb through the mucous membrane, bypass the GI tract, because I've seen people that take 50,000 units of vitamin D. Typically, prescriptive vitamin D is 50,000 units per week, and it's usually in a gel capsule. And I found numerous times, more often than not, that's not sufficient. It's not, and it's usually because I think it's most commonly because there's a problem with breaking down the gel capsule and properly absorbing it, or maybe the gut, the digestive tract, is so unhealthy that you have a problem with absorption. So we try to bypass that by using sublinguals or emulsified forms that you can that will absorb very easily through the mucous membranes, even before it gets to the GI tract. So that's a really significant issue. Let's see. So hey, Joanne, hope you're doing well. You guys are welcome. Thank you for being here. Misty, so you said like what tests? Misty, the test that I might use, I mean, I have a test menu of probably 40 or 50 different tests that I could use. There are probably 15 tests that I use on a regular basis. So when you say like what tests, I mean, that's like, I mean, and then within one test, like, so some of the expanded blood panels that I'll use, which is one of the most foundational things that I typically order when I'm looking at someone's health. It has, I don't know, let's see, maybe 70 markers or more, maybe more than that. I'd have to really count them out. But so when you're saying what tests, I'm really hesitant to recommend any type of tests, because it's a lot of people like will want to jump ahead with looking at, like, let's say food sensitivities. You're like, well, I'm having all these GI tract reactions, or they have bloating and GI tract problems, so they think the first thing they've got to do, and they'll often experience those with, you know, when they eat certain foods, so they think, well, I've got to figure out what foods I'm reacting to. Well, the question becomes, you know, it's a lot more than just, hey, are you reacting to a protein in the food? Why are you reacting to the foods? You know, do you have low stomach acidity, so therefore you're not digesting and breaking down the food proteins, and then you're reacting to them because your gut's inflamed? Do you have a GI tract infection? Do you have a bacterial overgrowth? Do you have a yeast overgrowth? If you have a yeast overgrowth, why do you have yeast overgrowth? Because some people will they have chronic candida, and one of the issues, there's a theory that it may actually be growing as a protective mechanism to prevent absorption of different types of heavy metals. So there's some different theories and things that we have to consider, and clinically, I see that people want to get food sensitivity testing when they're reacting to foods because they want to know what kind of foods they can eat. But the first question should be, why are you reacting to foods in the first place? Why have you lost oral tolerance to the foods that you're consuming? So a lot of times, I mean, if you were going to start with testing, you have to get foundational testing done first that looks at inflammatory markers and thyroid hormone physiology very in depth, and blood sugar and electrolytes and liver enzymes and iron status, and a lot of the things that are really foundational to look at first. And then you would get, second priority would be probably looking at a stool panel to look locally at what's going on. Whenever I work with people one-on-one, typically we do much more extensive testing, just because I'm constantly teaching. A lot of what I do day in and day out is creating and teaching, and so I work with people on a very limited basis. So whenever I work with people, we get extensive testing because I don't have the time clinically to go through tons of trial and error with people. I used to do that, but now we have to go through. I just have people I look at what's going on and say, okay, these tests are the tests that I recommend to help you get to the bottom of it as fast as possible, and try to help you out. But stool panels are oftentimes helpful too, because they can help give you ideas as to local environment of the gut. I mean, if someone was going to say, hey, I want to get a food sensitivity test, I'd be like, well, if you don't know what's happening locally with your gut, I wouldn't get a food sensitivity panel, because you might have an infection in the gut that's causing inflammation, that's making the gut leaky or permeable, that's causing you to react to the foods. Right? So, so changing foods and seeing what foods you react to, if you change your foods, you'll be to the new foods you're consuming in a month, because you didn't address the cause of the ability of the gut wall that's allowing food proteins into the bloodstream and driving the reaction. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I know it's not as quite as simple as it may seem. Some of these answers, because we're complex systems. We're made of complex systems, and understanding how those relate, you got to put it in the context of the person's presentation, what's happened to them historically over time. So you can make some generalized suggestions that can help people for sure. It's really, when you're talking about testing, like what you do, really depends upon how did it develop and manifest, what are your signs and symptoms, what's going on with you, right now. Still, sorry guys, I'm just reading some of the comments. If you have questions, post them in the comments. Audra, I'd have to look at that more to answer that question. You can feed, you can feed bacteria with iron. You got to be careful about the bugs that when you're taking iron. Sometimes, when you see, so there's a question about taking iron with certain types of bugs, gut bugs. And so one of the things that we'll see is that iron can actually feed some of these bugs. So you'll see that in some people, ferritin, your stored form of iron, will go high. And that may be an adaptive response of the body to storing the iron rather than allowing it to be free and available for bugs to eat and consume and grow. So it might be an adaptive response. So that's getting a little bit more technical though. Let's see what else, guys. I'm looking at some of oils and corn sugar, but please, it's really hard. I'm only 34 with Hashimoto's high cholesterol. Hey, Shada. I am. Yeah, this can be. I mean, listen, this can be really tough. Like, so when we're looking at how do we approach these types of inflammatory problems, elimination diets can be helpful, but they're only tools. Like these things, a lot of these diets that I see people on, and even the diets that, our dietary programs and things that I recommend, they're tools, guys. They're tools, but they're not intended to be forever. It's just like supplementation, quite frankly. Using nutritional supplements, I don't think they should be done. I don't should use nutritional supplements for, you know, lifelong. I think that that's a big mistake. I think that you've got to try to be more congruent with how our bodies are intended to function and live. And what is that? That's with food. That's with food, like real food, right? Not necessarily processed food, not vitamins, which are a man-made processed thing that we use. Now, I find that vitamins, minerals are very helpful, you know, to use with people initially or over a period of time to support very specific biochemistry. But lifelong utilization of some of these things, you've got to say, you know what, is this really how we would have probably, how as a human being I would have interacted with my environment, you know, long term? I mean, you've got to just say, you know, do we digress so far from what it really means to live and breathe and function on this planet? Have we diverged so much that we are sick as a result of some of that? And so you've got to consider that in the context of, like, you know, a functional medicine approach and what we're doing. Are we really diverging so much that it's not a natural, it's not the way our bodies are intended to function and live? And, you know, that sounds like, you know, a really, you know, kind of how can I not be derogatory? Well, it's a concept that some people kind of scoff at, you know, but I will tell you that less is more. And the more that I learn, the more I realize that less is more. You figure out what's in the way of the body's function, you remove it, you give the body what it needs, and then you get out of its way and you stop trying to be, you know, stop trying to, you know, to act and function as if you know better than your body does. Okay, so giving it food is one of the best things to do. That's why food is so important. But supplementation is I think is an important thing, but it's only temporarily. Let's see. So hi Misty. Yeah. So you had an iron transfusion. It helped your low blood level a lot. Yeah. So that gets complicated, you know, when you need a transfusion. There's a lot of things going on there. The reasons for that, you know, this is beyond the scope, or I would like to elaborate, but I don't know anything clinically or anything. But there's really, some of these things are so far, you know, they're so complex, like a lot of things going on with you guys. I'd love to be able to help you and give you feedback, but it's you have to ask a lot more questions to comment intelligently and give you some direction or idea of what I think about your cases. So, hi Denise. If you're vitamin D and B deficient, could it be from a gut problem? Absolutely, absolutely. It absolutely could be from a gut problem. You know, you've got to look at your diet. If your diet's pretty good, it has whole foods, you have leafy greens in there. You got to look at your digestive tract function. You know, that's one of the things, like, we assess the gut a lot of different ways, but one of the ways that I start with assessments are looking at questionnaires. So we look at these different assessment forms, and we look to see, are you very symptomatic with your colon? Is your colon symptomatic? Do you have signs of problems with intestinal integrity? Do you have bloating, excessive gas? You know, all these different signs and symptoms of gut dysfunction. And if those are occurring, then it's very clear that there is a gut-related issue. It's just the question becomes, what is it? And you've got to look at the diet and say, okay, can we change diet and see if the person improves? So, I mean, there are a lot of things that can be contributing, but yeah, you can be vitamin D deficient and B deficient from a gut problem. You know, there's a lot of different things that could be occurring. You know, when we look at digestion and absorption problems, I look at a lot of different potential drivers. You know, we find as you get older, your stomach acidity does decrease with time. So that's a bigger issue for some people than it is for others. If you don't have adequate stomach acidity, then you don't stimulate your gallbladder and your pancreas to release enzymes into your food, and you don't break it down and absorb the nutrients from you. Thoroughly, you won't extract the iron from it. So there's lots of different things that could be contributing. So I know that it just kind of snowballs, right? There's a lot of things that are connected there. But anyway, I just want to share this with you guys about inflammatory bowel disease. You know, I approach it very similarly to how I do any other autoimmune condition. And you want to support it specifically. You want to work it up to the best of your ability to figure out what are the immune system drivers, And is there any reason that the immune system might not be optimally regulated? Okay, so very broad concepts, but that's really what you have to do. So I hope this is somewhat helpful. If you have other questions, please do post them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them later, and we'll try to give you guys feedback. We have a ton of videos where I talk about these things in quite a bit of detail. So hopefully we can point you in the right direction. But I hope this is helpful. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Hey guys, Dr. Shook, thank you for viewing our videos. I hope they help you out. If you want to, just subscribe to our channel somewhere here. You can watch a video that YouTube's actually selected for you, so hopefully it'll help you out. If you need any other information or resources, just look in the description. We've got links to our website, to our 9 lab test guidebook, and everything else that we do. I really appreciate you, and I hope you guys have a great